Christian, is more money needed?
Well, first of all, I'm a bit surprised that this report is even treated as a news story, because there's always someone somewhere who's going to say the NHS needs more money. I said this when they got the last cash injection, that the NHS is just going to bank this money, and in a couple of weeks or months, someone else is going to say we need a few more billion. There is no conceivable level of spending at which the NHS is going to say, right, now we have enough, now we're happy, we really wouldn't know what to do with another few billion, let's stop it there.
Vicky, what do you think?
Well, we've seen what's been going on with the NHS lists of the waiting list, which had gone up, how cancer treatment has suffered, although there's been a little bit of an improvement recently. So it seems to me that to suggest that the NHS does not need some extra cash for the moment is not correct. But the truth is that, of course, with the pandemic and what's been happening since, the NHS has had extra problems to deal with, and the government has put some extra money. It did last year, and the question is whether that is going to be sufficient, what they've done so far, to ensure that some of those long queues are dealt with. And we have an aging population, we have increased demands, and it is very, very difficult to calculate the productivity of the NHS, which has been attacked. But in reality, what we need to look at is a lot more, not just what goes in terms of inputs, but what comes out in terms of outputs. And the Office for National Statistics tries to calculate that by doing quality adjustments. It seems that productivity overall has been going up over a period of time. COVID has messed it up a little bit in terms of making those calculations in such a way that we can completely believe them. But the reality is we are a society that needs more support, more care. Social care is suffering, as we know, in terms of funding, and dentistry doesn't get anything, or hardly anything at all from the government. Calls to expand all that. So what it suggests to me is that actually we need to look at the NHS system and see whether it's fit for purpose in terms of meeting the needs of the population, irrespective of what we decide in the end in terms of how it's funded.
I mean, there's valid points in there, Christian, isn't there? In the sense that we know the NHS is not working, and there are various factors for that, and how things are getting worse at the moment. So it's hard to look at it and say, well, actually, some more money wouldn't help, isn't it? I mean, a boost of cash would certainly help improve and provide more care, wouldn't it?
Yes, of course. But the thing is just, you could say that at any level of spending, more money always buys you some extra care, some extra things. I'm just saying there's no logical upper limit. But if we look at this in comparison, we are already in the global top 10 when it comes to healthcare spending as a proportion of GDP. We're now spending more than 11% of GDP on healthcare, and that you can still find a handful of countries that spend even more. But Britain is well above the EU average in those terms, well above the OECD average. We are already pretty high up that ranking list, and there was a time when you could have argued, say in the early Blair years, when you could have argued, okay, the NHS spends less than most of its peers, spends less than comparable systems, but that is no longer true, and it has not been true for quite a while.
I mean, Vicky, that's a good point, isn't it? 11% of GDP is a very large sum. When does it get to the point where we are just plugging a hole, when actually we need to start looking at something like reform of the NHS rather than just bottomless pit of funding?
There are loads of different ways in which you can fund your health service. You can have insurance that goes directly to pay for your costs, still free at the time of receiving that help, that support, if you like, when you're ill. But you pay for that over a period of time, and that goes into a particular fund, and that covers it. Well, loads of other countries do that. So there are all sorts of mixed systems as well that exist. I mean, we did have the national insurance contributions until now, until recently, which were supposed to be going for this. But of course, we're reducing the rate of national insurance contributions, as you know, in the last, we certainly saw that in the autumn statement, and we're going to see, we've also saw that in the budget where that's been cut. Now, the question is there a dedicated fund that can be used for this? We don't have that really, because all that is now going into the normal tax system rather than being directly aimed for the National Health Service. So we don't have that. We could have had it. To move from a system where we are now, which is funded mostly by taxpayers, to one where you move to more private sector insurance system, a mix like you have in some European countries, what you have in Asian countries, may make sense over a longer period of time, but it is going to be so disruptive to achieve that. And what the government is trying to do instead is saying we're going to be putting some money into improving the efficiency of the National Health Service. There is now this 3.5 billion extra that has been announced in the budget going over the next few years, and that will give us huge improvements in efficiency. Will save about 35 billion is what Jeremy Hunt seems to think is going to happen over the period they're looking at over the next 5 years. And then we'll use that to cut taxes rather than saying we're going to use that to actually improve the outcomes of the National Health Service more generally. So I'm afraid, we need to really recognise that health is important, and health is very important for the economy. Getting people back to work, all these people in long-term sickness right now, requires money, but the outcome at the end, in terms of what it means for the economy, can be very substantial.